"You shouldn't be here this late, ma'am," Malik said, his voice low but steady, mop in one hand, eyes locked on the shadowy figures moving behind her. Victoria Hale froze. Her heels tapped a nervous rhythm on the concrete floor of the underground garage. She turned toward the voice, then toward the two men still approaching her in silence. Something about them, their pace, their posture was off, very off. "I know," she whispered, glancing quickly over her shoulder. "But I didn't think—" "Move," Malik ordered. The CEO of Halcyon Systems had barely taken one step before the ambush began. One man lunged, the other reached for something beneath his coat. Malik moved first. Mop dropped, stance lowered, instincts from a past life surging back like muscle memory. He struck the first attacker in the throat, twisted, blocked a blow from the second. His elbow cracked against bone. A short scuffle, fast and brutal. Within seconds, both men retreated into the shadows, disappearing into the bowels of the garage. Victoria leaned against a pillar, breath shaking, one heel broken. Who are you?" she managed. "Maintenance," Malik replied, already checking the area. "And you're lucky I'm working overtime." The cold of Denver's December night crept in through the open stairwell door, wrapping around them like fog. Malik's uniform was soaked at the hem from melted snow, and there was a thin cut on his arm, leaking through the fabric. He ignored it. She was safe. That's what mattered. Minutes later, security finally arrived too late, too loud, and completely unaware. Victoria told them little, simply nodding toward Malik and saying, "He stopped it." They looked at him skeptically. "A janitor? Really?" Later, in the employee lounge with humming vending machines and a buzzing fluorescent light overhead, she approached him again. "Thank you," she said. He was washing the blood off his hands, quiet, face unreadable. "Didn't do it for thanks." "No, but I still owe you." He didn't answer, just dried his hands on a rough paper towel and walked away. At home that night, Malik sank into the worn couch beside his daughter, Lila, who had fallen asleep with her head on his lap, a coloring book open beside her. He kissed her forehead gently. The television was still on some rerun about baking competitions and frosted cupcakes. Outside, snow fell harder now, dusting the windows with white. He looked toward the kitchen, at the picture stuck to the fridge. Him in uniform, Danny, his wife, grinning beside him, holding baby Lila, a "voted" sticker pinned next to it. Small things, American things, ghosts. He hadn't told anyone about that night in Kandahar, the one where he made a call too slow, the one where Danny was left a widow before she could be a bride for long. Since then, he'd done one thing: survive, quietly, invisibly. The next morning, Halcyon Systems was back to its glossy, buzzing self. Coffee carts rolled in, assistants typed frantically, boardroom doors opened and shut. Victoria sat in her office, staring at a blank security report. The footage was gone, not broken, erased. She clenched her jaw. Someone inside had wanted that moment to disappear, but Malik hadn't disappeared. That afternoon, she found him near the freight elevator, replacing a flickering light. "I need to talk to you," she said. He didn't look down. "About what?" "About what happened last night. I already filed my statement." "Not officially, not completely." "Ugh." He paused, then looked at her. "So, now I'm under investigation?" "No," she said. "I want to hire you." Malik raised an eyebrow. "To mop floors or fight assassins? To keep me alive." He laughed once, sharp and short. "I have a daughter. I mop floors so I can get home safe to her. That's the deal." Victoria took a breath. "And what if this isn't just about me?" He looked at her, really looked. There was something honest in her face, determined, but scared. Not the fake kind of fear rich people wear when a meeting doesn't go their way. Real fear. Still, he shook his head. "I'm not a bodyguard." She stepped back. "You could have walked away last night, but you didn't." He didn't answer. He didn't have to. That night, as Lila drew pictures of him fighting monsters in the parking garage, Malik sat at the kitchen table, silent. Across from him, an untouched plate of macaroni cooled slowly. He kept hearing Victoria's voice. What if this isn't just about me? Outside, the wind howled over Denver. Inside, Malik stared at his calloused hands. Maybe the past had found him again. Maybe it never left. And somewhere in that quiet, beneath the snow-covered rooftops, and the hum of the old fridge, a decision began to form. He didn't want a new mission, but what if this time the mission had chosen him? Malik didn't sleep much that night. After tucking Lila in, he lay on the living room couch, staring at the ceiling, mind circling around Victoria's words. What if this isn't just about me? The garage attack, the missing footage, the way those men moved it, all felt too deliberate. Not some random mugging, not some fluke. It was professional and silent, just like the kind of missions he used to read about in briefing rooms halfway around the world. The next morning, just as Malik poured the last of the off-brand cereal into a chipped bowl, a soft knock came at the door. He opened it slowly, already suspicious, and there she was. Victoria Hale, standing in a winter coat too thin for the cold, holding 2 cups of coffee and looking more out of place than anyone ever had in the faded hallway of his apartment building. "I brought coffee," she said, attempting something between a smile and an apology. "You shouldn't be here," Malik muttered, stepping into the hallway and pulling the door closed behind him, careful not to wake Lila. "I know, but I didn't know how else to reach you. You're not exactly listed in the company directory as resident hero. I told you last night I'm not for hire," he said flatly. "I'm not looking for a bodyguard," she replied. "I'm looking for someone I can trust." "That's even worse," he said, almost to himself. She handed him a coffee anyway. He didn't take it. "Miss Hale, I've got a kid. I don't need trouble. I need a paycheck and peace. That's all." "But you didn't stay out of trouble the other night," she said quietly. "You jumped into it." He looked away. That wasn't about bravery. That was muscle memory. That was instinct. That was pain masquerading as reflex. "You know something's not right at Halcyon," she continued. "You saw how those men moved. That wasn't random. And now the footage is gone. Wiped. No record. No interest from internal security. No follow-up. You don't find that strange?" He did, but he didn't want to admit it. "I'm not asking you to come back to war," she said. "I'm asking you to help me understand who inside my own company is trying to take me out." He let out a long breath, cold fog curling in the morning air. "You're the CEO. Don't you have people for that?" "Yeah, but I don't know which of them I can trust. That's the problem." She looked tired, despite the polished look. Malik saw past the curated image. She was rattled, and still standing. "I'll think about it," he said. Victoria nodded. "That's all I'm asking." She left him standing there in the hallway, holding 2 coffees he didn't want, with 1,000 thoughts he couldn't shake. That afternoon, Malik met up with an old friend, Miles Winters, a former cybersecurity expert who now spent most of his days in his cluttered garage rebuilding busted drones and laughing at conspiracy theories. Miles had been there for Malik when Danny died, the only one who stayed. "I need to ask you a favor," Malik said after a long pause over mugs of microwaved cider. Miles raised an eyebrow. "You mean besides pretending that this garage is still a business?" Malik cracked half a smile. "Someone wiped security footage from a corporate system. Clean. Too clean." Miles leaned back, suddenly serious. "Halcyon? Yeah. Corporate espionage or inside job. Feels like both. And," Miles rubbed his face, "you always did know how to get tangled in the wrong people's messes." Malik's face darkened. "This time it's not just about me. If someone like her can be targeted in her own building, what chance does anyone else have?" "So you're in?" "I don't know," Malik said quietly. "I've got Lila. I've got my life together barely, but it's stable. I can't blow it up again." Miles nodded, then added, "You once told me doing nothing is still a choice. I remember that." "And so?" Malik didn't reply. He just stared out the garage window, watching a school bus roll by. Later that night, as he put Lila to bed, she looked up at him with sleepy eyes. "Dad, is it true you were a superhero once?" He hesitated. "Where'd you hear that?" "Miss Carla at school said you used to be a soldier. She said soldiers are superheroes." Malik ran a hand through her hair gently. "I used to wear a uniform, that's all." She yawned. "Then why don't you wear it now?" He kissed her forehead. "Because I promised your mom I'd come home, and I did." But after she fell asleep, Malik sat alone in the living room, looking at that old photo on the fridge again. Danny's smile was still there. So was his guilt. The next morning, he walked into Halcyon not through the employee back door, but the main entrance. No janitor's cart, no uniform, just him. Victoria met him outside her office. "Does this mean?" "It means I'll look around," he said, quietly. "No titles, no contracts. You see me, you don't see me. Understand?" She nodded, something like relief flashing in her eyes. As they walked down the hallway toward the executive wing, Malik noticed a man eyeing them, a square-jawed older man in a tailored suit with too much stiffness in his shoulders. The name badge read Mason Burke, head of security. Mason smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "New hire?" he asked. "Consultant," Victoria said curtly. Mason nodded slowly, then walked away. Malik watched him until he turned the corner. "You don't like him," Victoria said. "I don't like how he watches you like he owns you," Malik replied. And just like that, the war Malik tried so hard to leave behind had quietly begun again, this time in a world of glass walls and boardroom politics, where betrayal didn't come from the enemy's rifle, but from a colleague's handshake. Only now, the stakes weren't just his life, they were hers too, and somewhere deep inside him, something shifted. Not the soldier, not the janitor, but the man who had once sworn to protect what was good even if the world refused to see it. "Do you believe in ghosts?" Malik asked quietly, his eyes scanning the wall of framed photographs in the executive hallway past CEOs, founding partners. All of them white men with cold, triumphant stares. Victoria glanced at him, puzzled, as she entered her private office. "You mean metaphorically?" she asked. "No," he said. "I mean the kind that still linger after you bury the truth." She didn't reply. She didn't have to. She knew exactly what kind of ghosts he was talking about. It had been 3 days since Malik had agreed to help her. In that time, he'd familiarized himself with the building's layout beyond his usual janitorial zones. He learned who entered where, who stayed late, who avoided eye contact. But most importantly, he had started connecting patterns, the cleaning logs, the badge entry records, the supply requisitions that didn't match. Someone had erased the garage footage, but they hadn't erased their trail completely. Victoria had been unusually quiet those past few days, preoccupied, always glancing over her shoulder. She'd pulled back from meetings, even skipped a quarterly strategy session. Malik noticed the tremor in her hand whenever her phone vibrated. He noticed the way she avoided locking eyes with Mason Burke, the head of security. That same man had made 3 unscheduled visits to her floor in 2 days. Coincidence? Malik didn't believe in coincidence. That night, Malik visited Miles again. The garage smelled like engine oil and old coffee. Miles was hunched over a disassembled laptop, soldering something with delicate precision. "I traced the badge entry override," Malik said without preamble. "Night of the attack. Someone used a master key card to disable cameras in P3 and override the elevator logs." Miles raised an eyebrow. "You get that from Victoria?" "No," Malik said. "She doesn't even have access to that level of data. But someone in facilities forgot to scrub the HVAC logs. The system recorded a power dip exactly 4 minutes before the footage vanished. Someone inside knew how to manipulate it without triggering alarms." Miles whistled low. "That's serious planning, like military-grade serious. Or corporate sabotage," Malik muttered. "What do you want to do with it?" "Set a trap." Back at Halcyon, Malik started doing things differently. He returned to his janitor's schedule, at least on the surface, but kept an ear to the ground. He lingered longer on the executive floor. He made small talk with assistants. He tracked patterns, like which departments worked late and who always left right before Victoria. And one night, he found what he was looking for. A man named Brett Collins, director of strategic operations, seemingly mild-mannered, polite, former Ivy League, too clean. Malik had noticed Brett always walked past Victoria's office around 7:15 p.m. every night, without fail, never knocked, never spoke, just walked, a shadow. Until that night when Malik followed him. Brett exited through a maintenance stairwell, restricted access usually locked. Malik waited 30 seconds, then used his own backdoor key. He found Brett in the sub-basement, near the server room. Not touching anything, just watching, listening. "You looking for something?" Malik asked, his voice calm, deliberate. Brett jumped, startled, but recovered quickly. "Oh, I was just getting some air. Too much buzz upstairs." "In a windowless sub-basement?" Malik asked, eyes narrowing. Brett gave a hollow chuckle. "Guess I'm weird like that." Malik didn't respond. He watched Brett leave, noted the sweat on the man's collar despite the chill. Something wasn't right. The next day, Malik told Victoria. She didn't seem surprised. Brett's been on the short list for interim CEO in case of succession, she said. The board likes him. A lot. Too much. Enough that some of them might prefer me gone. Malik's eyes hardened. Then he's not working alone. Victoria stood, pacing. There's a meeting tomorrow. Private boardroom, top floor. Not on the calendar. Only 8 of them. All senior partners. You invited? Number. Then I'll go in your place. How? Leave that to me. The next night, Malik stood at the back of the executive boardroom in a pressed maintenance uniform, pushing a supply cart. No one looked at him. No one ever did. That was the gift of being invisible. The room was filled with murmured voices, clinks of expensive glassware, and phrases like market instability and leadership uncertainty. He pretended to clean, but he listened. Words like transition, vote of no confidence, and succession plan drifted across the table. Brett was speaking. So was Mason, and a few others whose names Malik had seen on quarterly memos. Then something caught his ear. Brett, she's unstable, erratic. The incident in the garage proves it. She's not safe. The company's vulnerable, under her command. Mason added, we're not suggesting she's a threat, just compromised. Someone else. We need a clean handoff, quiet, no press. Malik's blood turned cold. This wasn't about business, this was a coup. Later that night, in Victoria's penthouse, Malik laid it out. Every word, every face, every threat. She sat silently, absorbing the betrayal. So, what do we do now? She asked. Malik looked out her window at the Denver skyline, lit like a circuit board beneath a snowy sky. We hit back, he said. Not with noise, with precision, like them. She swallowed hard. You said you didn't want to go back to war. I didn't, Malik replied. But I never said I'd let them win. And in that moment, the ghosts Malik once feared seemed to settle behind him not as chains, but as armor. The war hadn't started in the desert. It had always been here. Just quieter, cleaner. And this time, he wasn't fighting for a country. He was fighting for the truth. Malik knew the next move had to be silent, surgical. Retaliation wasn't about confrontation, it was about exposure. Let them unravel themselves. Let the lie decay from within. At the break of dawn, before the city stirred, Malik sat in Miles's garage again, sipping coffee so strong it could cut through steel. Miles leaned over his keyboard, screens blinking with lines of code. You sure you want to poke the bear? He asked without looking up. This bear has already clawed its way into the boardroom, Malik replied. I'm just showing people the teeth they've been pretending not to see. Miles tapped a final key, then turned the screen toward Malik. I've got something. The internal messaging app Halcyon uses their own encrypted system, but a handful of execs have been using burner IDs to send shadow communications. Someone's been coordinating this push to oust Victoria. Malik's eyes narrowed. Can you trace the messages? I can trace patterns. One of them links directly back to Mason's device, and another Brett's executive assistant. She's been forwarding meeting times, movement logs, even Victoria's calendar. It all fit. The ambush in the garage wasn't just intimidation, it was a test. See how she'd react, see who'd protect her. When she didn't buckle, they escalated. Now they were laying the groundwork to replace her quietly. No scandal, no press, just a clean handoff. Malik wasn't going to let that happen, not when he finally saw what this fight really meant. Later that day, Malik met Victoria in her private elevator, the only place in the building not tapped or surveilled. She stood with arms crossed, her usual confidence shadowed by something more human weariness. Tell me, she said. Malik showed her the data, screenshots, logs, usernames, timestamps. She studied them carefully, her eyes scanning with a quiet fury. They think I'm weak, she murmured. No, Malik said. They think you're alone. That night, Malik changed his uniform. No longer the janitor, no longer invisible. He wore a black suit, simple and sharp, and walked into Halcyon's annual charity gala beside Victoria. The ballroom was lit like a palace, crystal chandeliers above, violins playing in the background. The city's elite gathered, champagne flutes in hand, smiling through porcelain masks. Brett was there, of course. So was Mason, standing stiffly near the security booth, eyes scanning. Malik kept his posture casual, but his mind calculated every movement, every glance. This wasn't a party, it was a battlefield. At the center of the ballroom, Victoria stepped onto the small stage, welcomed with polite applause. She looked radiant but reserved. When she began speaking, her voice was steady. Tonight, we gather to honor innovation, leadership, and community. Polite nods, smiles. But innovation means little if leadership is compromised, and community means nothing if we protect the wrong people. A slight pause. Brett shifted in his seat. There are those within Halcyon who have mistaken silence for submission. Let me be clear, I see you. Murmurs rippled. The crowd shifted, unsure whether they were witnessing performance or war. Victoria continued, I've spent years building something worth protecting. I won't watch it rot from the inside. So tonight, we reset. And with that, the lights dimmed. A large screen lit up behind her Miles' handiwork. A silent stream of data. Internal messages, blurred names slowly coming into focus. Secret meetings. The erased footage logs. A video clip of Mason entering the server room 3 hours before the garage ambush, time-stamped and geolocated. The room gasped. Mason moved instinctively toward the stage, but 2 private security guards contracted by Victoria through a third party intercepted him. Brett stood frozen, his smile stiffening. This is slander, he said. No, Victoria said calmly. It's proof. The crowd broke into murmurs. Some pulled out phones. Others stepped away from Brett and Mason as if distance could cleanse them. Malik watched it all quietly. He knew this wasn't the end. It was just the unmasking. Later, in her office, Victoria sat in silence, the adrenaline wearing off. Malik stood near the window, watching the snow return, soft and silent like a benediction. You were right, she said. It was never about the ambush. It was always about control. He nodded. People don't always need a reason to destroy something good. Sometimes, it's enough that it wasn't theirs to begin with. She looked at him. You were the only one I could trust. I'm not proud of that, he replied. That's not how it should be. Victoria leaned back, exhaling. The board will try to spin this. They'll say they didn't know, that Mason acted alone, that Brett was misled. And they'll believe it. That's how power protects itself, Malik said. But now they know you're not afraid to fight back. She studied him. What about you? What happens now? Malik's voice dropped low. Now, we make it stick. The next morning, Mason was escorted out by federal agents on charges ranging from obstruction to conspiracy. Brett resigned for personal reasons. And Victoria, once seen as a young idealist, was now suddenly described by the media as unyielding, strategic, formidable. Funny how survival changes your press profile. For Malik, everything changed and nothing did. He still picked Lila up from school, still packed her lunch. But he was no longer invisible. People greeted him differently in the building now, with a nod, with respect, sometimes with quiet fear. He didn't chase it. He didn't need it. At home, Lila asked him, "Did you fight more bad guys?" He smiled. Something like that. She handed him a crayon drawing a castle, with a small figure standing guard at the gate. "That's you," she said, "so no one gets in to hurt the queen." Malik felt something swell in his chest. Not pride, exactly, something heavier, something sacred. He kissed her on the head and said, "That's exactly right." And as the snow fell gently outside their window, Malik realized something. Justice doesn't always roar. Sometimes it whispers. But if you listen close enough, you can still hear it breaking through the silence, step by step, like a soldier returning home. 2 weeks after the gala, the Halcyon building felt different, quieter on the surface, but beneath that stillness was a tremor of unease. Malik could feel it every time he stepped off the elevator. People smiled quicker now, but they looked longer. Conversations paused when he passed. No longer just the janitor, he had become a symbol, whether he wanted to or not. And Victoria? She hadn't changed in the way the board feared. She hadn't become vindictive or ruthless. But she had become sharper, colder in her resolve. The smile was still there, but it was lined with something steely. One morning, while reviewing new hires for Halcyon's revamped internal security team, Victoria looked up and said, "They still think this is over." Malik, leaning against the far wall, arms crossed, nodded. "Because they think exposure is the same as defeat. It isn't." Victoria tossed the folder aside. Mason and Brett were pieces, small ones, But something bigger funded them, covered their tracks. I want to know who. Malik's face hardened. Then we need to follow the money. Malik reached out to Miles again. What they found was buried deep, deliberately obscured multiple shell companies routing funds to one of Halcyon's external consulting partners, Corton Strategies. On paper, Corton was just a corporate advisory firm, but they'd been receiving payments earmarked as communications services, totaling over $2.4 million in the past 6 months. That, in itself, wasn't the red flag. The red flag was that Corton had ties to Langley former intelligence assets operating under civilian contracts. It wasn't sabotage, it was an orchestration. Victoria arranged a meeting with Corton under the guise of discussing a new acquisition strategy. The firm's Denver rep, a man named Rusk, arrived in a tailored suit and handshake firm enough to bruise bone. He smiled too easily, his words dipped in charm, but Malik watched his eyes calculating, cold, always watching for tells. "Miss Hale," Rusk began, "we're thrilled at the possibility of deepening our relationship with Halcyon." Victoria replied smoothly, "So are we. Though I must admit I'm curious about your approach. Your name seems to come up often, even when we're not looking." Rusk didn't flinch. "We're very good at what we do." "I believe that," Malik said, stepping forward, "especially when you're paid to make CEOs disappear quietly." The room froze. Rusk's smile remained, but the eyes gave him away brief tension, calculation. "I don't know what you're implying." Victoria placed a file on the table, screenshots, financial reports, and the communication logs that Miles had decrypted. "Then perhaps you can explain why a firm specializing in communications was receiving funds routed through a shadow entity connected to my former head of security." Silence stretched, then Rusk leaned back. "Miss Hale, there are games bigger than your company. You stepped onto a board you weren't invited to. That comes with consequences." "I'm not afraid of consequences," she said. "No," Rusk said quietly, "but you should be." The meeting ended in stalemate, tension thick enough to cut. But Malik had seen what he needed. Rusk wasn't just an operator, he was a broker. Someone else was still behind him, someone higher. Back at Victoria's office, Malik laid it out. Rusk is the front, there's someone behind him. Someone with enough influence to access intelligence-grade resources and embed them in corporate movements. This goes beyond Halcyon. Victoria stared at the window, the city below gray and distant. "You think this is personal?" "Number, I think it's habitual. They do this all the time. CEOs, politicians, even journalists. Replace, silence, discredit. But this time, the pattern broke. You didn't fold. You didn't vanish. That's the threat." She turned to him. "Then let's make the threat real." Together they built a strategy not to fight, but to expose. They needed more than data. They needed testimony, proof from within Corton, or one of the connected firms. Malik reached out to an old contact, someone he hadn't spoken to since Afghanistan. Noah Yates, former Signals Intelligence, now living quietly in Boulder. When they met in a diner off I-25, Noah wore flannel and fatigue in his eyes. He listened to Malik's story silently, nodding only once. "I've heard of Rusk," he said. "He doesn't do small jobs. If he's in Denver, it's because someone high up wants a shift in power without the headlines." "Can you help?" Malik asked. Noah stirred his coffee. "I can get you a name, maybe more, but it'll cost you. I'm not asking for favors." Noah looked up. "No, you're asking for war." 3 days later, Noah delivered. The name, Alton Greaves, former DOJ, now heading a private intelligence firm called Azimuth Group, funded through layered investment vehicles tied to government contracts and private equity. Azimuth had been quietly expanding into corporate influence. Halcyon was just one of many. "This is bigger than we thought," Victoria whispered. Malik nodded. "And it's not just about control. It's about creating silence where resistance used to be." That night, they compiled the file. Not just on Mason or Brett, not just on Corton or Rusk, but on the entire infrastructure. Connections, payoffs, patterns. Enough to ruin careers, enough to start hearings. But it wasn't about revenge. It was about truth. Malik knew that now. As he walked home under the falling snow, he passed by an old man sitting on the stoop of a closed shop. The man looked up, nodded. "Cold night," he said. Malik nodded back. Yeah, but the storm's passing. He didn't mean the snow. And when he got home, kissed Lila on the head and tucked her in. He paused by the window, watching the city lights flicker in the distance. For the first time in a long time, he didn't feel like a ghost anymore. He felt like a man who still had something worth protecting and the will to do it, no matter the cost. The congressional hearing room was colder than it looked, not in temperature, but in spirit. Rows of polished desks gleamed under sterile lights. Cameramen lined the back wall, lenses trained like snipers. Microphones blinked red. Every word here would be recorded, dissected, broadcast. Malik sat behind Victoria in the second row, his presence unannounced, his name not on any official list. He preferred it that way. Beside him, Miles fidgeted with a flash drive, the same one holding the evidence they had risked everything to collect. Noah Yates sat 2 seats down, his cap pulled low, shoulders hunched. He had agreed to testify, but only under alias and closed session. Still, just being in this room made him sweat. Victoria Hale took the witness seat. Her posture was firm, voice measured. What I'm about to present, she began, is not speculation. It is not personal. It is fact, documented, verifiable, and alarming. She laid out the evidence methodically. The payments to Corton's strategies, the communications routed through shell companies, the manipulation of internal halcyon systems, and most damning, the ties to Azimuth Group and Alton Greaves. Every name she mentioned caused a ripple in the room. Faces tensed, pens paused. Then came the footage, leaked documents, email chains, recordings of covert conversations. For the first time, the infrastructure of silent influence was made visible: names, times, decisions. It was no longer a theory. It was an operation. One aimed at reshaping power in the shadows, eliminating voices that resisted conformity. The congressman chairing the hearing, an older man with snow-white hair and a skeptical glare, asked, "Miss Hale, are you suggesting that elements of our own intelligence community have been weaponized against private citizens?" "I'm not suggesting it," she said. "I'm proving it." The media exploded that afternoon. Headlines screamed variations of the same truth. Shadow ops in corporate America. Private intelligence tied to CEO removal attempts. Victoria Hale exposes covert influence ring. Halcyon stock dipped, then soared. Investors saw not instability, but integrity. Victoria became a household name, not for scandal but for survival, for standing firm in a storm designed to wash her away. Back at Halcyon headquarters, a quiet celebration unfolded. No champagne, no cameras. Just a few trusted faces in Victoria's office: Miles, Noah, Malik, and 2 board members who had returned an apology and admiration. Victoria raised a glass of sparkling water. "To those who don't disappear," she said. Malik didn't raise his glass. He just looked at her, nodded once, then stepped outside. Later, he found himself walking the empty halls of the building he once mopped. Every corridor had a memory, every corner a ghost of who he used to be, and yet, he wasn't angry. He wasn't even proud. He was simply aware of how fragile justice could be and how much it cost to protect it. Downstairs, he ran into Ellen, one of the night janitors. She smiled, pushing her mop bucket. "Funny seeing you here, boss," Malik chuckled. "I'm no boss, Ellen. Just visiting the past." "Yeah, well," she said. "The past never looked so clean." He walked out into the Denver air, crisp and clear, and called Lila's school. "Tell her I'll be early," he said. "Daddy's done with work." When he arrived, she was already outside, lunchbox swinging, face lighting up. "You came early," she shouted. He knelt, arms open, and caught her in mid-jump. "Always," he said. "Always will." "Oh." On the way home, she asked, "Are the bad people gone now?" "Some," he answered honestly. Some are hiding, but we made it harder for them." She nodded as if that made perfect sense. "Did you tell the truth?" "Yeah," he said softly. "We did." That night, as he tucked her in, she whispered, "You're like a knight, Daddy, for real." Malik kissed her forehead. "Knights get tired too, sweetheart, but they never stop standing guard." And when the house was quiet, he sat alone in the living room, lights low, memories loud. He thought of all the moments he had doubted himself, questioned the point of speaking up, of acting when it would have been easier to look away. And he thought of Victoria, once untouchable, now unshakable, and of Noah, who gave up anonymity for truth. The world wouldn't change overnight, but it had changed just enough. Enough for one little girl to grow up in a world where her father was heard, where silence was no longer safety. And that, Malik realized, was victory. Not in courtrooms, not in headlines, but in the quiet that follows when the storm finally passes and you're still standing. Not for glory, but because someone had to. Sometimes, justice doesn't roar, it whispers through the quiet courage of ordinary people. This story reminds us that true strength isn't found in power or wealth, but in the unwavering choices made by those who refuse to look away when something is wrong. Malik, a janitor and single father, didn't fight for glory, he fought because silence would have cost him his soul. And through his courage, we see that doing the right thing, even when no one is watching, can change not just a life but the whole world around it.